Hi everyone, this is Covid, your host at Beyond the Code by Typo. I'm back with another episode and a new amazing guest who's an entrepreneurial soul from Singapore. He is the CTO and co-founder of Hubble.Build, and also he is one of the youngest leaders so far on the podcast. Great to have you here, Peter.
Hi, COVID. Hi, everyone.
All right, Peter. Thank you for coming on the show. And as a usual format, we have this quick fireside chat with
Cool.
every guest of ours. And here we would be knowing a little more about you personally. All right?
Sure, sure. Let's go. Let's do it.
Perfect, perfect. So let's get started. All right. So tell us about your first production blunder.
Oh, okay. Well, production blunder, I guess, is when the company was still small, right? So it's about 2017, 2018. We were running a very small engineering team, about three people. Everybody doesn't know what's a good engineering practices, and we really prioritize speed over other things, and some of the points, there's some bugs on productions that happened. And as a CTO, obviously I have production access. I've root access last time to everything. And we tried to make a very quick fix for our customer because it was a business critical issues, and it made things worse. Classic, right? And yeah, the customers call us for a good few hours. The CEO has to hear all the customers making noise to us, and yeah, that's pretty much. And then we learn our lessons, and then we know, okay, no more,
How
right?
many calls did you get from the customers that day?
How many? What? Oh, dude, don't. I mean, I guess it's just okay. The good thing, it was we're still small, so it was just one customer, but it affects a lot of users
Oh,
within
okay.
that customer. But yeah, we have to say sorry for about 2,000 times that day, I guess.
That's the best thing you could have done.
Yeah, I mean, but we managed to. I mean, we have backup. Luckily, we have backup, so we managed to sort of roll back things. But it took a while because everybody was not seasoned yet at that point. Yeah.
Sure, sure. I mean, I see that there's a lot of energy. You're young, but still, there must be some daily kick for you, daily source of energy that gets you
Yeah.
to work. I would love to know about that.
I mean, obviously, the first thing in the morning is a cup of coffee. So you get your caffeine kicks. That's the first thing, the most important thing for
Of
all
course.
engineers. Um, Well, I've been doing this with this company for about 6, 7 years, right? Since it started. Obviously, it takes a lot of things to keep it going, and sometimes you have just no motivations to wake up and like the same things that you were building a few years back. You're still at a stage you still need to do something. But for me, it's the people, right? So we have grown so much that now I have a lot of people in the company, and we are doing great things. Everybody's so talented in the team that it just makes you feels like it's fun, right? Because everybody just heads down, talk about ideas and implementing it. Obviously there's the not so fun part about like
Yeah, yeah, of
deadlines
course.
and all those things, but yeah, I mean it comes together, but it's fun.
So it's people for you then.
Yeah, it's people.
Perfect, perfect. All right. One last thing. What's your favorite go-to video game?
Well, I'm an old school guy, so I still play Dota. uh Pretty often, and not that often, but it's too often for my wife's liking.
Got it.
And yeah, well, yeah.
Well, great then. Great. Perfect. So, Peter, this was great knowing you. These were some fun things that we got to know now. Now, moving on to some important substance. We know what Hubble.Build does, but for our audience sake, first of all, I would love for you to tell them what Hubble.Build does.
Cool. So Hubble.Build, we are a construction tech startup. We are based in Singapore. We are mainly providing a lot of solutions, B2B SaaS, especially for the different construction companies here in Singapore and Southeast Asia. We are looking into essentially digitizing, automating, and obviously at the end of the day, doing more of insights for our customers. Yeah. So it range different operations and verticals in the industries.
Thank you, Peter, for that introduction. So now my question is, I personally have been an entrepreneur. I have seen that journey, but unlike you, I mean, this journey of 0 to 1, my experience is little less than you. So I would love to hear your experience, how it has been starting from a garage. Because last time when we were talking, you told me
Yeah.
about this. You were just
Yeah.
3 members, and now scaling it
Yeah.
up, having around 40 dev members.
Yeah.
So this is definitely a journey, and it's
Yeah.
almost been a decade for you into this, right?
Yeah.
So how has
Cool.
it had been? Let's start with some of your best experiences of this journey, the most challenging experiences of its journey.
I mean, as a co-founder slash CTO, starting with 3 people and now you're leading about 40, the whole company is about 70, 80 people. It's about that transitions of like you gotta I would say adapt, and your role keep changing as the team grows. When we started with 3 people, essentially I'm an engineer. I have to code, right? Everybody like me and my one of the other engineer, we have to code. And I have to go deep into the back end, the front end, everything. Every day is about code, just keep developing and launching new products. When in which 10 is about being a team lead and a manager, right? So now you have these 10 people and you got to make sure they're happy and everybody's aligned of what they're doing. Now you grow into 40, it's a different ballgame by itself. And each transitional period needs a lot of self-reflections and also just humility, just to know that, okay, I'm not good at this, I gotta improve on this part. If you are the person that say likes coding, right? At 40, you're not gonna code most of the time, right? So
Right.
you got to be like, okay, you pick your poison. Obviously, you still can code outside of your most responsibility, but you have to understand that your main responsibility is not to code anymore, is to inspire and direct the vision of the team.
Right.
So I guess that is the most challenging part. Yeah,
Doing that transition from being an engineer to a leader is definitely a transition,
it's
and and
crazy.
and and I think it doesn't come easy, particularly with the engineers, right? They have this habit of
Yeah,
just coding, being with their laptops and desktops. So
yeah,
yeah, it definitely is. So let's talk more about some of those incidents where you actually had to change your daily habits or behaviors while you were working as an engineer to a leader today. Let's
yeah.
talk about those, some of those challenges.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I guess the journey from 0 to 1s and obviously 1 to 10s is gonna be very different between
Of course.
one company to another. For me, it's when I think we reach, let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 6 people in the engineering team. That's when I'm still heavily coding, and then what I realize is that people are just doing their own things, right? And there's a lot of miscoordinations with regards to what we are building, how we are building it, and somebody got to take charge, right? Somebody has to make sure that we do have product managers at that scale. So somebody has to lead the product, talk to the CEO. Most likely, it's the CEO leads the product, right? But
Right.
but the CEO has to do sales and all the other functions. So somebody got to step up and make sure that there's a lot of coordinations, and we are building the right things at that point in time. You know, I guess that's sort of the trigger. And like, okay, I can't just keep coding. I got to like do something else? And should I hire someone to make sure that I don't need to code that much anymore? That questions start to come to mind. And you will realize that because you feel unproductive at the start. That's what I felt when you're not really code anymore. You don't write anything, you're not developing anything. Because you're just talking to people, writing some documentations, setting up infrastructures, talking to AWS guys, all these different people.
Right. Right.
Um, and you feel like, hey, I'm not producing anything. But you realize then your team actually is moving faster because you're building the right things. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody's happier in general. And that's, I think, I guess that's a trigger for me. And they're like, okay, I guess that's how my role has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. Actually, there is a point when you start leading teams, the motivation for you is to make them work without any friction. You start working as the oil
Yeah.
for the team. So
Yeah.
your efforts start becoming the oil for the team. And that's what your daily motivation should be. So that's cool. I
Yeah.
think I can totally relate to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Apart from this, For Hubble, I'm sure that this journey of 0 to 1 involves this very important step, which we call as product market fit, right?
Hmm.
So back in that, like 10 years back, actually, when you started this, what was the landscape like? Why did this idea come up? And how did
Right.
you figure that out, that, okay, this is something that the market needs and this is what we need to build? And
Right.
how, as a technical co-founder, you contributed there? Because
Right.
that's a very important piece. A lot of engineers, a lot of technical co-founders skip on this step of realizing that how they can drive the business impact.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would love to hear that from you, how you did that in that 0 to 1.
Yeah. Well, this is gonna be quite a long story, but I'm
No
trying
worries,
to,
we have time.
yeah, I tried to make it, shorter for this. Um, so we started out actually just building different projects. The company was not building what we are building today, so we are more of like an agency at the start. So we're building different things, right? And one of it was for constructions, and that time was more for manpower tracking. We got this from a construction companies, obviously, and that's when as we're building it, we're realizing that hey, the solutions in the market are not that great, right? And there's opportunities. I thought it was kind of, when I look at the product, I was like, hey, I think the market should have this kind of solutions already, right? It's just natural. But again, construction was very backwards.
Yeah.
Even until now, it's sort of at the same level with agricultures and like mining industries and all those industries. So the adoption of new technologies is taking a while. So it started with a real problem. So we're not inventing a problem; it's actually a problem in the industries, and now we're just making sure that the product actually solves that problems, and we
Solves
are
the problem.
highlighting the values. And with that, we start entering the industry. We talk to more people and realize the bigger issues of things. Like really, there's nothing that is automated. There's nothing that is digitized. Everything pen and paper, and we can't really do anything because there's no data for us to do anything, right? So the first
Right.
step
Right.
is to collect those, create infrastructures for people to at least have a digital space and database of things, and then we can start doing more things and enhancements on top of it, like analytics and all those productivity stuff. Yeah. So that's sort of how it grows. So it's pretty organic at the start. Again, we didn't take venture fundings or like institutional capital funding at the start until about 2020. That's when we get our Series A. Before that was just really reinvesting on our profits. So we really grow organically by talking to the users. And what we realized is that everybody got to talk to the users at the start, right? And this is what I preach, or not I preach. This is what I sort of try to enforce in the company as well. As an engineer, you got to know what you're building, right?
Yeah.
And it's not, we when we hire engineers, we take time to sort of make them realize that it's not just about doing the tickets that the product managers create for you,
Right.
right? A lot of people when they come in, they will just like, okay, I have this ticket, let me just do it. I read it, I'm done, push it, somebody reviews, merge and stuff. But it goes beyond that because you need to know a few things, right? You need to know who you're building it for, who's going to use the product, and what is it for, and why they need it. Because the way you build it is going to be different, right? And my point is that yeah, you can have your product managers, product designers, and they all work so hard to figure out the user experience and all these things. But as the engineers, you need to really understand what you are building as well by talking to the PMs and the UI UX about
Correct.
what they have been writing and designing, and then you build it in the code, right? In the company, we call it the purpose-driven values. This is one of our core values that we always talk about. So essentially, what I did now is I just do some random conversations with my engineers, and I ask them like, "Hey, what's up? How you doing? Okay, what you're working on today?" And then they will like start explaining what they're working on, and I'm like, "Oh, why are we building that?" And if they can't answer, I'm like, okay, you go and ask your manager and you get back to me. So there's a bit of, just random checks here and there. The one answer that I hate, that I always tell them I hate, is that when they say, oh, because whoever says I need to build this, or
No,
like the
this is
PM wants me to do it. I'm like, dude, yeah, okay, figure it out, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think this is really, really amazing. And with all the previous conversations that we have had on this podcast, this has been highlighted multiple times. This purpose driven, building from the engineering
Yeah.
teams has to be like ingrained. That
Yeah.
doesn't come naturally
It's not. Yeah.
in the dev team. So it's a very good point that you understood and realized it as a co-founder in the early stage, and then you could actually preach actually in the teams, and then make
Yeah.
sure, yeah, it's kind of that only, and it's
Yeah.
really cool. I think this is one amazing thing which every tech co-founder should keep in mind and should
Yeah.
make sure how things are proceeding ahead.
Yeah.
Amazing, Preeta. All right. And now there is something which I would love to know from the current scenario.
Yeah.
So now you're 40 dev teams, right?
About
One
there.
thing you
Yeah.
already mentioned that you are trying to bring in that value of purpose driven development, right?
Yeah.
But there are more aspects when you have to handle a 40 member dev team,
Yep.
right?
Definitely.
You have to take care of their experience, you have to take care of their well-being, you have to take care of whether they are being efficient or not, because on day to day, even if you align them with the business goals, you give them those values, still you just need to like make sure how things are moving.
Yeah.
Are we really moving on the right track or not, because sometimes
Yep.
you tend to deflect, right? So
Yep.
in simple words, how do you measure the overall well-being of your teams? That's my question one. And then how do you ensure that they are being efficient at the same time?
Yep.
So that's a thing that we would really need to know.
Yeah, yeah. I would say there's a $1 million questions, right? And I mean, there's a lot of literature on that. I mean, the infamous literature from McKinsey or something,
Yeah,
about
yeah,
it. It's it's tough, right? Because you're trying to measure something that is intrinsically hard to measure into something that is chewable as a management to just see. But in Hubble, essentially, we are looking at few things. So one is obviously the team structure itself, how we put the different middle managers and make sure that they're not overwhelmed with like 30 people, for example, like one
yeah,
person leading 30 people.
yeah.
So we always keep it about eight, a maximum. Yeah, it's about eight. Most max is eight. Some people are definitely less than that. And make sure that everybody knows that you can talk to this guy about anything. So that's the first one. Second, well-being. So we have two approach here, right? So one is what we call the metrics and KPIs, and
Okay,
second is the qualitative, right? So for
okay,
qualitative, we do this thing called the 360 evaluations, and this is obviously something that we built with HR in terms of like, okay, we need to have this routine checks, 360 evaluations of all the people. So this is actually the only time for individual kind of measurements. And when we
okay.
talk about KPIs later, everything is at squad and team levels. There's no individual metrics,
Got it.
right? So the only individual evaluations that we get is from the 360 evaluations. And this is where people will like, okay, how can everyone improve, right? So the idea is not to rat people out that they're not doing their job, but it's more of like how each one can improve, what they feel they're doing well, what they feel they need to improve, and what they feel they need to be stopped doing, right? And it includes me.
Can I ask you a question here?
Go ahead.
So, sorry, it's just that I'm too curious to know a lot of things. So, uh, when you say that you're doing this 360 at the individual level, do these people know that when this feedback is collected, their names would be there along with that? So let's say I'm one of the developers in the team.
Yep.
I give you my feedback around
Yep.
all the questions or the
Yep.
survey questions that you ask.
Yep.
So do I know that my manager would know that this is a feedback from COVID?
No. Nah.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the way it goes is this. So there is the what we call the manager feedback. So the manager give feedback to the team, the
Yeah.
individual people in the team. That is obviously transparent because the manager has to
Yeah. Yeah.
say
Of
it to the
course.
team. And then there is the peer review, which is between the team members, and then there's the upwards review, which is the team members evaluate the managers. So for peer review and upwards review is all anonymous. The only one that knows is the HR, and then basically HR will come up with this reports, which is just the evaluations and the summary of all the different scoring and the qualitative feedback, but the names are not all there. Yeah.
Got
So
it.
the idea is that again we want a very candid, very open.
Exactly. That's what the point is, that if they
Yeah.
know that this is going to be non-anonymous, then they would hide away the real facts. They would not come up with the things. So
The
that's
thing
what my
is this
question.
though, sometimes with the qualitative feedback, because you're so close to your team, you know how they write.
Yeah, that's definitely there.
so
That's
so
definitely there.
when I was reading my own feedback, because I get my managers to feedback to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is from this guy. Like I can really figure it out from the way he writes. But again, like we established such a relationship that is okay.
Exactly.
Like that culture has to be open enough that I tell my team, even like in the hey, you have feedback from me, just drop me a message. I'm okay. Obviously, I can say that, but it's still, they're still related.
Yeah,
But
I
with
totally second that
with your
thought.
direct reports, you got to have that kind of relationships. Because if not, there'll be politics involved, and people are not saying things that they really feel. It's gonna trickle something. Oh, it's sort of deviate from the questions, but yeah,
No, no, I think this is very important. This detail is actually important, that
yeah,
even if you put in systems and processes in place to measure the developer's experience or measure their well-being,
yeah,
it is important to understand that the underlying psychological safety in the
yeah,
teams is very, very important.
yeah,
Otherwise, the truth will not come up and you will
yeah,
not be able to identify the problem. So I think
definitely,
this is a very important point. You have to like promote it as a founder, as a promoter of the company. You have to promote this culture also within the team.
yeah,
So that totally
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah. I
Cool.
mean, we have like so I enforce the managers has to have to go have this thing the one-on-ones with the team members, and there's also skip levels whereby I can skip level to the seniors, or there's the different structures of skip levels. And the thing that I enforce is that the skip levels, you are not ratting people out, because you know when you do a skip level, somebody want to feedback about the managers, right, to you.
Right.
Now you cannot say that to your managers and hey, this guy says this about you. Like, yeah. So that's very confidence between
Confidential. Yeah.
the two
It has to
people,
be. It has to be.
even one on one. So anything within the one on one stays within one on ones between you and your manager. It doesn't go out to everyone else.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Well, so that's the qualitative part, and from there, actually, it's more of the experience. Is people happy? Anything wrong with the pay or with the career progressions, with the challenges? That should be, we can spot it up through the 360 evaluations and also the one-on-ones.
Yeah.
With regards
Perfect.
to performance, though, this is the very tricky part because people like to know like which engineer performs better than which engineers, and then there's like, oh, a line of code with no, not exactly, And the key things is this: when we sort of build this, we need to understand the engineering culture itself. And with software engineering, right, it's a very interdependent team whereby you cannot just do things alone, especially at our scale. Because okay, when you build this, it might impact another team, it might impact the
Yeah.
front end, the mobile, and you have to constantly talk to different people,
Sure.
right? And it's a very highly collaborative environment. If you start doing individualized metrics tracking, for example, story points completed by a person, you I can get that metrics, right? I know exactly how to get that metrics. But if you start putting that as the North Star, people will not help each other. And actually that will become worse for your company or for the team. So
True.
instead, what we are looking is actually the full team, the whole team philosophies. Right. So I'm not gonna trickle down to individual guys. I'm just looking at the whole team.
Right.
So within each of y'all, doesn't matter. So you all figure it out collaboratively who is doing what, who is better at doing what, and basically the numbers I'm looking at is the squad's velocity, and this is owned by the EAPs, right? The engineering managers
Engineering
for this
managers.
particular squad,
Yeah.
right? So that's one. We're looking at again. I'm not comparing within squad one, squad two, squad three. How come
Yeah,
your
of
velocity is
course.
slower? What I'm looking at is your progress, your trends. If suddenly there's a dip, you are slowing down. I want to figure out why. And the idea is not to penalize you, but let's figure out what we can improve on. And obviously, because there's a lot of things like the kind of problem statements that each teams are handling is very different. The number of members are different, so you can't really put a benchmark. Oh, everybody got to achieve like 40 story points. Like this is very
Yeah. Yeah.
is nonsense.
It's not.
Now, what we are looking at as well is because one of the values again is accountability. We are looking at the number of stories promised or like putting into the sprint versus completed. Because what we want is okay, we are evaluating on overestimations or underestimations,
Right.
and making sure that when the PM say or engineers are not doing their work, you have a data, right? And how to improve on that. We're as well looking at um things like bugs per stories. So bugs per story is very interesting. It's something that we just really built the infrastructures. Is more of like because we want to increase velocities, but we don't want that to hamper the quality, right? And with buffer store is very interesting because if people are rushed. So that's what we are looking at. So if you are rushed, you tend to just quickly get it out of the way, hack things out, but you have like $2,000,
Yeah,
right?
correct.
And
Quality
you'll
gets
feel
compromised there.
so yeah. So again, and it's for the manager to say, okay, I'm rushing too much, right? So let's work with the PMs or with whoever stakeholders involved to like, hey, my team needs a bit more time. We are not gonna hit it because everybody start doing things very fast. There's a lot of bugs being churned out, and obviously there's a lot of miscellaneous things like code churn rate
Yeah.
at the macro level. We have code review durations, which is sort of
Okay.
like we don't like a lot of the blockers was like, oh, somebody's not reviewing the code, and stuff. And then we tell you what, let's have measurement on this and how to improve the process for code reviews. Something that's very interesting, which is developed by my previous VP of engineering, was the commit push time.
Okay.
So at which time of the day the commit is being pushed. So
That's
what
right.
we're trying to look here, and as well as the line of code, the line of code changes distributions. No, so basically what happened with these two metrics is that it requires a lot of context of what's happening with the team. So you cannot just put a blanket context and then just, oh, if you are like who is like the highest contributors with the line
Yeah.
of truth.
Yeah.
It's not like that. So the idea is that what we want to look at is technically just distribution of work, right?
Okay.
If you see that the line of change distributions is heavily skewed towards a single person, first and foremost, that person is a bus factor,
Yeah.
right? And are you relying too much on this person because maybe this person is so good and you just dump every single thing on him and it's not distributing to other people? That's one. Commit push time is the same thing. If you look at your engineering team and some people just keep pushing at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., are you being sustainable to that guy? Are you pushing that guy too hard? What's going on? Right. So, but again, some people likes work at that hours,
Yeah. Of
and
course,
we
that's
can't
right.
say, hey, you cannot push at 2 a.m. That's not going to work. But it's more, again, that's why it requires context because the managers will look at this and figure out, oh, wait, this guy, why is this guy constantly pushing at like 2, 3 a.m.? Then he can engage, or that person can, the managers can engage, like, hey, are you okay? Why are you doing that? Is it your
Yeah.
style?
I think
Yeah, it's more of that.
that's pretty amazing actually. How with these metrics where you are trying to understand the efficiency of your team, at the same time you are being very considerate about that they are not overworked or they're not like doing
Yeah,
things they like. So that's
yeah.
pretty amazing, and that's a new way to look at some metrics. Perfect. I think one question here I have, when you talk about the distribution of the work, right? How do you ensure, like, once you identify, okay, like this person is the one who is doing the maximum amount of work in the team, and that can be done from various ways. One of them could be like how many one is doing the lines of code, and for the team,
Yeah.
what is the ratio, right? You can understand that. But let's say you identify, what usually are your next steps? Like, how do you make sure that this thing gets better?
Well, technically, is this firstly what we need to identify, is this even an issue, right? So once is that if it's just because this guy is super fast, blazing fast, then we can't follow. Hey, you cannot do too much changes, right?
Mhm.
Now, if it's actually an issue, this is when the managers and me we gotta figure it out. And what some of the steps is that we look at when we do the sprint planning, like how is the task actually being distributed, right? So we want to know is more of like, are we as a manager side relying too much on this guy or not, right? And obviously then talk to the teams and the rest of the teams and being very proactive and very intentional when we distribute the task and make sure that he's not like skewed in terms of the distributions and ask him to chill sometimes. That works too. Second is that sometimes there are things that comes ad hoc without the manager being aware of what's going on. And because everybody's on Slack, or like some designers or even myself sometimes is a culprit of this. I just text one of the engineers that I know is very reliable and like have been working with me for a while. I'm like, hey, I spot this. Can you help me with this? And then he was like, okay, done. Right. Um, and more of those might translates to, you know, again, we only have X amount of hours a day. If you are doing too much ad hoc works, you're not doing the actual product strategies and pushing the product forward. So it's more of that. And it's tough, right? Because at one point you still want to make sure that guy is producing,
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course, of course.
but you have to be very intentional because you don't want at the same time say for example, you have a feature, call it feature A, right? And feature A has a lot of parts. So what you don't want end up happening is that guy in charge of, if it's a big features, everything about that big features. So you have to be intentional about, okay, you are fast, okay, let's build this one for you and then give it to someone else.
Someone else.
The idea is that you want another engineer to have context about that as well,
Of
such that
course.
when he is, say for example, sick or he's on holiday,
Exactly.
you are
Exactly
not
the point.
screwed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that totally makes sense and it answers the question really well. Great. I think this conversation can take really
Yeah.
long and we have
Yeah.
so many areas to touch here. But I think we'll take a stop here.
Cool.
And I would really like to thank you, Peter, for sharing your insights and thoughts about how to scale from 0 to 1 and then how to manage teams at this scale. This was really amazing. Any parting advice, words for our audience?
Parting advice, take care of your engineers and they will take care of your product.
Amazing. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks so much, COVID, for the invite.